Hello neighbor, I'm Robert Burns, Vice President of the Louisiana Association of Professional Auctioneers and also the founder of Sound Off Louisiana, the blog that allows folk to comment on governmental operations within the state of Louisiana that would be of concern to them. I'm going to go ahead and address one question that I've been asked by some colleagues, some friends, about whether or not I would do a sound off feature on Bobby Jindal. The answer is no. I just don't see the point. I don't think anyone would watch it or have interest in it. Bobby Jindal is not eligible for re-election as governor for Louisiana. Not that he would have a snowball's chance of winning even if he was. I think anyone with a few functioning brain cells realizes that his presidential aspirations, they're not going anywhere, justifiably so. For those of you who may be clamoring to get a reliving, if you will, of the last 7.5 years. There are two gentlemen who will be coming out with books on the Jindal administration. One is Bernie Pinsonat. He's a pollster out of Lafayette, Louisiana. The other is Tom Aswell, who runs a blog called Louisiana Voice. Both of them, I'm sure their books will be quite interesting, and if you would care to relive the Jindal administration's last 7.5 years, probably either one of those books will quench your thirst in that desire. I am, however, going to do a sound-off feature, and today is installment 1 of what will probably be about a 5-part installment on another statewide elected official who is eligible for re-election and who in fact will be on the ballot this December, and that would be none other than our illustrious Attorney General James D. Buddy Caldwell. Over the next 4 to 5 segments, what I'm going to bring to you is factual information. I will have the documentation or video links to back up what I am saying, and I'm going to begin by covering what I believe will be Buddy Caldwell's legacy within the Attorney General's office, and it's not going to be a very good legacy, I can tell you right now. I can guarantee you it's not going to be, and that would be the CNSI / Bruce Greenstein trials, okay, and what led up to all of them, and the AG's involvement and things of that nature. So just to give a little bit of background, because no, I don't expect anyone to watch an hour-long video, so like I said, I'm dividing it up into 5 different segments, and we will begin with the CNSI Bruce Greenstein situation. But just to give a little bit of background, in 2010-2011, Louisiana's Medicaid servicing contract came up for renewal. The incumbent provider, Molina Services, and that's a critical name to remember, Molina, they'd held the contract literally for decades in terms of processing Louisiana's Medicaid services. Molina is a publicly traded company based out of California. The president of Molina is a gentleman named Norm Nichols. His name will also be very important as we go through these segments. They were one of the aspirants to obtain they wanted to keep the contract as it was bid out. There was another company though called CNSI, and that's short for Client Network Services Incorporated. From here on out, I'll always refer to it as CNSI because that rolls off so much easier. CNSI is a much smaller company, but everyone readily admitted that they had a superior technology for doing things more efficiently than was the case with Molina. In fact, Molina was informed that we don't believe you have sufficient technical expertise given the changes that have taken place. We don't believe you have the technical expertise to be invited to the table on this. Now, bear in mind, when we're talking about Molina, we're talking about a contractor that's got a large number of employees based here in Baton Rouge. So naturally, they weren't pleased to know that it was looking like they were going to lose the contract. Now, also an interesting dynamic in this was that a gentleman named Bruce Greenstein had been appointed to head Department of Health and Hospitals, DHH, by Bobby Jindal. And on June the 21st of 2011, he was undergoing his confirmation hearings in the Senate, and the legislators were clamoring to know who got this contract, because we're not talking about a small contract. We're talking about one of the largest contracts ever let by the state of Louisiana. We're talking about $200 million plus, and so they wanted to know who got it. And Mr. Greenstein did reveal that the winning bidder, who bid $185 million, was CNSI. That raised a few eyebrows because Mr. Greenstein worked for CNSI some 14 years before, and I did not, that's not a misquote, it was 14 years before, and he was only there for about a year. It was during 95 and 96. It was only a very brief tenure, but at any rate, CNSI was awarded the contract. Now, there was going to be about a 3-year or 2.5, 3-year transition period. I mean, you can't just up and have this transition take place overnight. So the goal was in 2014 that they would have everything up and running with CNSI, and Molina would be out of the picture. But then between that, there were going to be significant transition cost. And so what I want to introduce you to today is a gentleman named Steve Smith. Steve Smith. Easy name to remember because he will be the central player in all of this, okay? Steve Smith is a gentleman who was recruited by CNSI to head their Medicaid processing services. He was recruited, and he early December of 2010, he had been extended an offer to serve as a president of this division, reporting directly to the company's president, Mr. Ahmed, for handling the Medicaid processing services. So Mr. Smith goes up to Maryland to be evaluated. You know, the offer's already been made. I'm going to make the analogy of an NFL first-round draft choice. There are teams all the time that hey, we overrated this guy, okay? We've made a mistake. We're going to have to live with it. And that's pretty much what happened with Mr. Smith when he got up to Maryland. Mr. Ahmed made an evaluation, and he said this guy was overrated. We didn't get what we thought we were getting in bringing him on board. So here's what they did. Mr. Ahmed informed Mr. Smith that, look, we're going to let you stay on the company, but based on your performance of what we've seen here and our evaluation, we cannot justify the presidents of that division, who would be reporting to Mr. Ahmed. We cannot justify granting you that position. So what we're going to do is we're going to make you a senior vice president rather than a president of that division. You will be reporting to another gentleman. In other words, there was going to be another layer between Mr. Smith and Mr. Ahmed. He would be reporting to another gentleman rather than directly to Mr. Ahmed. Importantly, also, there was a reduction in his compensation. This guy was being offered $250,000 a year when it was his initial offer, but under the revised proposal under which he was to be a mere senior vice president, he would only be making $200,000 a year. I think most folk would agree that's still a pretty darn substantial salary. Nevertheless, when you start talking about these high-level positions, egos can really play a huge role. And Mr. Steve Smith, who also, well, we'll jump ahead just a bit. He would like, AKA Steve Smith, also John Cunego, K-U-N-E-G-O. Hopefully I'm pronouncing it close, because that's an alias that he would use when he decided to blow the whistle on CNSI, so to speak. But what I want to emphasize only in this first segment is his state of mind. He was seething over this demotion from president of this division to senior vice president and having another layer in between. And I'm going to provide you with a direct link to substantiate what I'm saying with regard to Mr. Steve Smith, aka John Cunego. All right? And so Mr. Smith fired off an email, and we'll get into that detail in segment 2. Segment 1, all I want to do is get you up to the point that Steve Smith is bitter. And so he fires off an email to Jeffrey Branch, who is the head of that division of the federal government overseeing these Medicaid servicing. Now, right off the bat in the email, and we'll provide that in segment 2, right off the bat he says, hey, I'm going to use an alias because I fear I may lose my employment. Now, the reality is he'd already resigned, okay? But now, from the period of March 2011, which is when his salary reduction went into place, through December of 2011, when he fired off the email. Now, he had resigned shortly before that, so he lied, saying, I may lose my employment. He'd already resigned. You know, this was his going away present, if you will. I tell you what, with folks like this on your payroll, you got real problems, okay? But we'll get into that in segment 2. All I wanted to do was provide the mindset of this gentleman who fires off this email, because that's what triggered everything, okay? Everything, the mess, the quagmire that you're going to see as we go through these segments that the Attorney General's office now finds itself in, it all came about from this disgruntled employee, Steve Smith, aka John Canigo. So I'm going to provide you with the documentation to substantiate what I've told you here in segment 1. That's all I'm really wanting you to grasp right now, is the bitterness, the anger that Steve Smith, aka John Canigo, feels toward CNSI. And why does he feel it? For the 2 reasons I told you, going from $250,000 to $200,000, and also not reporting directly to the president. So this is Robert Burns. This is installment 1 of me sounding off on our illustrious Attorney General James D. Buddy Caldwell. I hope everyone will have an enjoyable weekend. Hope you enjoyed last night's debate, and I look forward to bringing you installment 2 of Robert Burns sounding off on our illustrious Attorney General. Thank you so much.